We're on Ardent Acres Farm just south of Palisade, Minnesota in Aiken County. I've been farming almost all my life. I'm from Lyon County, Minnesota. My grandparents still have a farm down there. I chose farming as a way of life because it's a rewarding way to work with your mind, work with your hands, and see a tangible result to your efforts on a daily basis. I can't imagine not having a piece of land and some animals to raise. The operation wouldn't be possible without my wife, Veronica, certainly. Right now she's inside with our two daughters, Lillian and Edith. They're the next generation that we're getting this farm ready to take over. Someday they'll be in charge and we'll just be watching. Right now we have 54 head. Each year we sell off our 2-year-old steers for consumer sales. And right at this stage we're retaining all of our heifers to grow our herd. We chose Scottish Highlander cattle because they're slightly smaller in stature, they're easier to work with, generally more docile than some of the other breeds. They're a little more gentle, but they're good mothers. So we very rarely have to intervene with calving. It's just best to give them their space until later on in the year when it's time for tagging or vaccinations. So with rotational grazing, you take a large pasture, you make it into smaller pieces. And what that does is that replicates the natural action of ruminants on a prairie or on a grassland. And that helps them agitate the soil, trample in their own manure, trample down non-desirable species, and it also limits their pickiness. They have to eat a little bit of everything. That helps with their nutrient management. So different plants have different nutrients, it's healthier for them. And then it also helps make a more productive, healthy grassland. Every couple days we move them to a new partition. It's a bit more labor intensive, so you have to be out there a little more often. What we have here is what we found here. I don't believe the previous owner did any pasture interseeding either. Most of it's probably native or it blew over from neighboring farms. Right now it's mostly native grassland, so we have a lot of reed canary. Our primary legume out there is bird's foot trefoil. We're working now to interseed more legumes into hay fields to gain that production. And the experience we have interseeding those hay fields will then be applied to these pastures to get more value per acre out of our pastures. The crowding of animals in a smaller pasture allows agitation of the soil, incorporation of their manure into the soil, allows them to trample down woody species like those willows that we were fighting as well, and other weeds like thistles. So this patch out here, just off to our left, there used to be a lot of Canadian thistle out there. And when we just managed it as one big piece of grass, they could pick their way around that easily. But when we managed it as smaller sections of grass, they were forced to trample it down, and over time, that thistle gradually loses ground. And we retain a fairly diverse mix of grass and some forbs and legumes in there too, but the thistle gradually got trampled away. It didn't come back as strong year after year. We're still working on it, but we never had to spray it. That was the nice thing. We never had to introduce a chemical, which is possibly hazardous, possibly dangerous.
Sure.
We use the cattle to kind of manage their own food supply. You'll see the leaves on young trees, young saplings, are actually fairly high in protein, right? And in the older days, during times of drought, farmers would actually fell popple trees and they would use the leaves as a forage source. For us, we noticed that the Highlanders are more interested in a wider variety of food sources. So in our farmstead, we noticed a lot of even poison ivy when we first moved out here. But you move the herd through the small area of the farmstead for just a couple days and it's all gone. Whether it's being eaten or trampled, the poison ivy is not coming back as much. And especially with 2 little kids running around, that's beneficial.
Yeah.
We'll even see young thistle shoots that come up. The cattle will actually eat those too, right? And that's, you know, we talk to other operators that raise other breeds and we don't hear Angus eating thistles. But we see it with our own eyes here with the Highlanders.
In the subdivision of pastures that you've done in your wilder areas, have you seen good results in terms of the habitat that you'd like to see created in those areas?
You can see the difference in where we're able to manage the brush control with the cattle and where we can't. So for instance, some areas we just cut the brush. and we saw a grow back, right? It didn't all turn out wonderful. But in the areas where we were able to partition out and force cattle in, the woody vegetation didn't come back. So buckthorn, that's an invasive woody plant, and it spreads very rapidly. It's the first to green up in the spring and the last to brown out in the fall. It has a berry that birds like to eat, and it's a diuretic, so they spread the seeds all over, and it can take over an area pretty quickly and push out other native plants. Part of our conservation management project with the NRCS was to eliminate that from some areas of our property. So the practice we used was a cut stump application of an herbicide. So you remove the woody plant, it's a small tree, and a small spray of a selective herbicide on the open stump kills the plant almost 100% of the time. It worked out very well. We don't have any buckthorn that I know of on the property right now. Some of the woody vegetation did come back, but if you look on the whole, we've seen an improvement over, 4 years?
You bought these mostly from different people?
Oh yeah. I kept records of where they came from, so I wouldn't inadvertently inbreed.
Sure.
So for instance, we bought a bull, and we're gonna have to sell one of these heifers because they came from the same farm. If you would overstock, there would never be any taller grass that could act as habitat. If you would understock, you would see a resurgence of those invasive species and those brushy species. On our particular piece of land, our pasture, we don't ever mow it to the ground, as you see in some areas. We still have room to grow our herd and maintain a fairly high level of forage. And that's displayed in the fall. When you go into your winter, how much did you leave on the ground? Right here, if you're looking at what we're walking in now, they're cleaning up last year's leftovers and just beginning to get into this year's new growth. You look at some other farms and you see a lot of bare patches, a lot of mud. We have a wet, drought-resistant soil here, you can say, and if you overstock, you'll know it because you're going to have more mud, more bare patches. The movement of mineral and water, that can be a challenge too, because each partition then needs access to water and also a mineral feeder to help with their nutrient management. For water, we have ponds dug on site with solar-powered pumps to pump into permanent tanks. We also have piping infrastructure on site that allows us to move water from the well to portable tanks. And throughout the site, we have drainage ditches, and oftentimes those are full, and that's a source of water for the cattle as well.
You just have this pasture open for them now?
Yeah.
They come up for water? Or
they come up for water here. It's been too cold for us. I don't want to put that pump out and freeze it up, so we're just letting them come back here for water. I'm actually trying to build my own solar pump for the south one.
Okay.
I got a 12-volt bilge pump and then a float switch to turn it off. I have 100 watts of PV panels, and I'll see if it'll be sufficient to get that tank full and keep up with the cattle. Working with NRCS locally here has been a great partnership. The main benefit that they offer is their expertise, whether it's the implementation of conservation practices or standards of construction for some of the infrastructure projects. Their standards are pretty high. They're pretty stringent about how they want things done, but ultimately doing it right the first time, it pays off in the long run. Rotational grazing, that was through the EQIP program, and with that we received guidance on how to manage pasture in smaller partitions and also assistance in making those partitions. And what that allows us to do is limit the encroachment of non-desirable species, the brushy, woody plants, and also extract the most value out of each acre. The infrastructure for rotational grazing, so the fencing partitions, that was a cost share with the NRCS. It was a proposal from Jake Grantfors with our local NRCS office. He was working in conjunction with Pheasants Forever, and he was working to increase and establish upland bird habitat, particularly for sharp-tailed grouse. And it happened to be that good grouse habitat is also good cow habitat. So we had an interest there. We took into consideration the nesting habits and the breeding schedule of the sharp-tailed grouse as well. If you can time your haying and your grazing to certain areas at certain times, you can reduce the impact you have on the grouse nesting pattern. If you can leave a patch of grassland mostly undisturbed until August, that gives those hatchlings a time to get big enough to get out of the way, whether that's a hay machine coming through or a herd of cows coming through. Later on, after a year or two of these conservation practices, after limiting our invasive species and our brushy species, we would notice more sharp-tailed grouse in the area. We do have the advantages also of being adjacent to some state land and some county land, so the area here in Section 8 of Fleming Township became a better habitat overall for sharp-tailed grouse. Ultimately, to balance the conservation aspect with the production agriculture is a way to gain buy-in from the public at large. And taking into consideration the benefit of the environment brings a lot of people back on our side. I would recommend people learn more about the different programs. In many cases, they have a program that could benefit the environment and the area around your farm, and also incorporate an aspect of greater profitability. Usually the practices that they're recommending, they're not just good environmental sense, they're good business sense too.